Hey there. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring some Buddhist teachings on truth,
Okay.
virtue, and persistence.
Sounds good.
We've got excerpts from classic texts and some insightful commentary by Ajahn Lee.
Awesome.
What's really cool about this stuff
Yeah.
is that it's not just ancient philosophy.
Right.
It's a practical framework for living a better life.
Yeah, that's what's so fascinating about these concepts.
Right.
They're often seen as these lofty ideals.
Yeah.
But when you dig into the teachings, you see how applicable they are to our everyday experiences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with this idea of truth as a foundation.
Okay.
There's this great analogy in the Majjhima Nikaya about a royal elephant that goes into battle
Oh, wow.
using every part of its body
Okay.
except its trunk.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
The elephant trainer knows that
Yeah.
until the elephant uses its trunk.
Right?
It's not truly committed to the fight.
Wow.
And the text relates this to truthfulness.
Oh.
Even the small truths we hold back,
Yeah.
the little white lies or things we leave unsaid, they diminish our integrity.
It's like we're going into life's battles, holding back a part of ourselves.
Right.
I know I've definitely experienced that feeling, like I'm not being fully authentic.
Yeah,
Have you ever felt that way?
absolutely. And it makes you wonder,
Right.
what are the consequences of those little untruths?
Yeah.
How does holding back affect our relationships, our decision-making, even our own sense of self?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it leads us to another point made in
Okay.
M&80.
Okay.
Truth is something we can experience directly.
Right.
It's not just a set of beliefs. It's something we can discover
Yeah.
and verify for ourselves.
Right. It's about seeking knowledge firsthand.
Yeah.
Not just accepting what we're told.
Right.
But then we have this excerpt from the Anguttara Nikaya that adds another layer to the conversation.
Okay.
It suggests that not every truth needs to be spoken.
So how do we reconcile these seemingly contradictory ideas?
That's where the concept of skillful speech comes in, right?
Right.
It's not just about blurting out whatever we think is true.
Yeah.
It's about considering the impact of our words and choosing to speak in a way that benefits both ourselves and others.
Right.
Sometimes silence might actually be the most truthful action.
Wow.
Exactly. Truthfulness isn't black and white.
Right.
It's nuanced.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for speaking up. And there are times when holding back might be the more skillful choice.
Right.
It's about understanding the context
Yeah.
and choosing our words carefully.
This reminds me of a discussion in the MN95
Okay.
between the Buddha and a Brahmin named Kappadika Bharadvaja.
Oh,
They're talking about how simply relying on conviction
right.
or tradition to determine what's true can be limiting.
The Buddha is basically encouraging critical thinking. He's saying, don't just take my word for it.
Okay.
Investigate for yourself. That's a powerful message.
It is.
Especially today when we're bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah.
How do you sift through it all and determine what's true for you?
That's such an important question.
Yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in dogma
right.
or follow the crowd without really questioning things.
Yeah,
But these teachings encourage us to be more discerning,
I agree.
to examine our beliefs and be open to new perspectives.
And that openness to new perspectives is essential
Yeah.
when we move to the next concept, virtue,
Okay.
in these Buddhist teachings. Virtue is all about action.
Okay.
It's not enough to just have good intentions. It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Right. It's about walking the walk,
Yeah,
not just talking the talk.
exactly.
And Ajahn Lee has this great quote in Food for Thought that really drives this point home.
Okay.
It says, we tell ourselves that we want to be happy, but we go jumping into fires.
Right.
We know what things are poison,
Yeah.
yet we go ahead and drink them anyway. This is called being a traitor to yourself.
It's like we sabotage our own happiness with our choices. We all have aspirations.
Right.
But sometimes our actions don't match up. Think about your own life.
Okay.
Are there areas where you might be drinking poison, even though you know it's not good for you?
That's a really insightful question.
Yeah.
I know I've definitely been guilty of that in the past.
Yeah.
It's like that disconnect between what we know is good for us
Right.
and what we actually do. But the teachings offer a way to bridge that gap.
And that's where the 5 gifts come in.
Okay.
These are outlined in the Anguttara Nikaya, and they're not presented as strict rules,
Okay.
but as actions that create freedom from harm.
Okay. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with the 5 gifts.
Sure.
Can you break those down for me?
Absolutely. They are abstaining from taking life, stealing, harmful sexual conduct, lying, and intoxicants.
Okay.
And it's not just about avoiding these actions in a literal sense.
Right.
It's about cultivating a way of being that embodies these principles.
So it's about more than just following the rules.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the deeper reasons behind them.
Right.
And making them a part of who we are.
Exactly. And the text emphasizes how these actions have a ripple effect by embodying these 5 gifts. We not only create a more harmonious environment for ourselves, but we contribute to the well-being of everyone around us.
That's a powerful idea. It's like our actions have consequences that extend far beyond ourselves.
And that interconnectedness is a key theme in Buddhist thought.
Okay.
Another excerpt.
Yeah.
The AN 10.165 outlines 3 levels of purity. Purity in thought, word, and deed.
So it's not just about acting virtuously.
Right.
It's about cultivating purity in all aspects of our being.
Exactly.
Our thoughts, our words, and our actions.
Right. They're all interwoven.
Yeah.
Ajahn Lee expands on this concept in his book, The Path to Peace and Freedom, where he outlines 3 levels of virtue.
Okay.
He starts with the lower level, which he describes as basic morality.
So this is like the foundation of virtue.
Exactly.
The basic ethical guidelines that we all need to follow to live a good life.
It's about not harming others, being honest, and treating others with respect.
Okay.
It's the essential groundwork for a more virtuous life.
Right.
Then we move up to the middle level, which focuses on guarding our thoughts and cultivating goodwill.
I think a lot of us struggle with that.
Oh, absolutely.
Negative thoughts can be so insidious.
Yeah.
They can really take over sometimes.
Absolutely. This level of virtue is about becoming more aware of those negative thought patterns and actively choosing to cultivate positive ones.
Right.
It's about interrupting that spiral of negativity and choosing to focus on kindness, compassion, and understanding.
It's like we're training our minds to be more virtuous.
Exactly.
Just like we train our bodies to be healthy.
Yeah. And then there's this third higher level of virtue where it becomes less about following rules or suppressing negative thoughts and more about virtue arising naturally from a deeper understanding.
So it's like virtue becomes an integrated part of who we are.
Exactly.
Not just something we're trying to do.
And that takes persistence.
Okay.
It's not a one-time achievement. It's an ongoing practice.
Okay, so we've talked about truth and virtue. And it seems like persistence is the key to putting these concepts into action, right? But how do we cultivate that persistence?
Well, the source material uses some amazing metaphors that illustrate this point.
Okay.
One that stands out is from the Therigatha, which depicts Venerable Mattagaputta pushing through wild grasses as a metaphor for overcoming obstacles on the path to inner peace.
Wow, that's such a vivid image.
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, this is tough work, but I'm going to keep going.
Right.
I'm not going to give up.
Right. And this brings us to the concept of right effort, which is explored in both the Majjhima Nikaya and Samyutta Nikaya. This is a key principle in Buddhist practice. It's about finding the right balance of effort, not pushing ourselves to the point of burnout, but also not being too lax.
It's about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly.
Where we're challenging ourselves without overwhelming ourselves.
And to illustrate this point, the Anguttara Nikaya tells a story about Soma, who is struggling to find that balance. In his own practice, the Buddha uses a great analogy of tuning a veena.
I love analogies.
Yeah.
They make these abstract concepts so much easier to understand. So what's the veena analogy all about?
The Buddha explains that if the strings on a veena are too tight, it won't play properly. But if they're too loose, it won't produce beautiful music either.
Right.
It's about finding the right tension, the sweet spot where the instrument can create harmonious sounds.
Right. And just like with the veena, our efforts in cultivating truth and virtue need that balance too.
Yeah.
We can't be too hard on ourselves, but we also can't just coast along.
Right.
It's finding that middle path where we're making progress without burning out. Do you find that resonates with your own experiences?
Absolutely. It's something we all grapple with, isn't it?
Yeah.
Finding that sweet spot between discipline and self-compassion. And these teachings offer such a valuable perspective on how to approach that challenge. What's interesting is that this idea of balance also ties back to truthfulness.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about the 5 gifts we discussed earlier.
Okay.
One of them is abstaining from stealing.
Right.
Now, on a basic level, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But when we apply this to our modern world, it gets a little more nuanced.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
We don't often think about things like time, intellectual property, in the context of stealing, but those can be just as impactful as taking physical possessions.
Exactly. Have you ever felt like someone was stealing your time by constantly interrupting you or making unreasonable demands?
Yeah.
Or what about the way ideas and creative work can be appropriated without proper credit?
Right. It's almost like a subtle form of dishonesty.
Yeah.
We're not being truthful to ourselves or others when we engage in those kinds of behaviors.
Right.
So it's not just about grand gestures. It's about cultivating honesty and integrity in all aspects of our lives.
Precisely. And that's where persistence comes in.
Okay.
Cultivating virtue.
Yeah.
Especially at that higher level where it's integrated into our being.
Right.
Takes constant effort. It's like tending a garden.
Okay.
We have to weed out the negative thoughts and habits.
Yeah.
And nurture the positive ones.
So it's not a one and done thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process of self-reflection and refinement.
Right. And that brings us back to the story of Venerable Mattagaputta pushing through those wild grasses.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that the path to inner peace and liberation isn't always easy.
Right.
There will be challenges, there will be setbacks, but it's through persistent effort, through that right effort that we talked about, that we can overcome those obstacles.
Okay, I'm curious to hear more about this right effort.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean in a practical sense?
Well, in the MN 101, the Buddha outlines 4 aspects of right effort.
Okay.
It's about preventing unwholesome qualities from arising, abandoning those that have already arisen, cultivating wholesome qualities, and maintaining those that have already been cultivated.
So it's a two-pronged approach.
Exactly.
We're both working to eliminate the negative and cultivate the positive.
Exactly. It's like we're cleaning out the clutter in our minds and creating space for more wholesome thoughts and actions.
Right.
And this connects back to what we were discussing earlier about guarding our thoughts at the middle level of virtue.
Right. It's about recognizing those negative thought patterns and choosing not to let them take root.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that?
That's a good question.
It's one thing to say, don't think negative thoughts.
Right.
But it's another thing entirely to actually control our minds.
That's where mindfulness comes in.
Okay.
It's about cultivating an awareness of our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So it's not about suppressing those negative thoughts.
Right.
It's about observing them without getting swept away by them.
Exactly. And through that mindful observation, we create space to choose a different response.
Okay.
We can choose to focus on more positive thoughts, to cultivate kindness and compassion, to engage in actions that align with our values.
It's like we're taking back control of our minds.
Precisely.
Instead of letting our thoughts control us.
And that's where the concept of persistence is so crucial.
Okay.
It takes time and effort to develop that kind of mental discipline.
Yeah.
That ability to choose our thoughts and actions consciously.
So we've talked about truth, virtue, and persistence. And it seems like these concepts are all interconnected. They build upon each other.
Right.
But what does this all mean for our lives?
That's a great question.
How do we actually integrate these teachings into our everyday experiences?
Well, that's a great question, and it's one that each individual will have to answer for themselves. But I think the beauty of these teachings is that they offer a framework for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life, no matter what your circumstances are.
So it's not a rigid set of rules.
Right.
It's a set of principles that we can apply in a way that makes sense for our own lives.
Right. And the key is to approach it with that attitude of persistence and right effort.
Okay.
It's about continually refining our understanding of these concepts and finding ways to integrate them into our thoughts, words, and actions.
It's like a lifelong journey of self-discovery and growth.
Exactly. And it's a journey that can lead to greater happiness, peace, and fulfillment.
Right.
Not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us.
It really feels like these teachings offer a path toward a more authentic and fulfilling way of being in the world.
Yeah.
It's not just about personal happiness. It's about contributing to a greater good.
I think that's a key takeaway from all of this. These practices of truthfulness, virtue, and persistence, they're not just about individual enlightenment.
Right.
They have a ripple effect on the world around us.
That makes me think about the concept of right speech that we touched on earlier. It's not just about being honest.
Right.
It's about speaking in a way that uplifts and benefits others.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder,
yeah,
how would our interactions change if we all approach communication with that intention?
Right.
To speak truthfully, kindly, and with the aim of creating understanding.
It's like a shift in perspective, isn't it?
It is.
Instead of just focusing on getting our point across, we're considering the impact our words have on others.
Right. And that takes us back to the idea of interconnectedness.
Yeah.
Our actions, our words, they all have consequences that extend beyond ourselves.
So it's not just about cultivating these qualities for our own benefit.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our personal growth can actually contribute to a more just and compassionate world.
Precisely. And that brings us to a question we want to leave you with.
Okay.
As you reflect on these teachings of truth, virtue, and persistence, how might you apply them not only in your personal life, but also in a way that creates positive change in the world around you?
It's such a powerful thought, isn't it?
It is.
That by cultivating these inner qualities, we can actually make a difference in the world. It's like you're all connected, and our actions have the potential to create a ripple effect of positivity.
Exactly. And that's what makes these teachings so relevant, even today.
Mm-hmm.
They offer a timeless wisdom that can guide us toward a more fulfilling and meaningful life, both for ourselves and for all beings.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration of Buddhist teachings has given you some food for thought and some practical tools to apply in your own life.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep seeking truth, cultivating virtue, and persisting on your journey.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're taking a close look at the Buddhist concept of the 10 perfections.
Oh, very cool.
We'll be focusing on discernment and goodwill today.
Okay.
And for this, we'll be drawing from the teachings of 𝙀𝙖𝙖𝙞𝙀,
Wonderful.
a renowned Thai Buddhist teacher, using excerpts from his books Inner Strength and The Skill of Release.
I'm excited to dig in.
Me too.
Yeah.
So discernment, that's the first perfection we're going to be looking at.
Right.
And what I found really interesting was how 𝙀𝙖𝙖𝙞𝙀 actually breaks down 3 types of discernment in the pasted text.
Okay.
So we have learning by listening, thinking, and meditating. And, you know, it really got me thinking about the importance of actually doing something to really understand it.
Absolutely.
Not just hearing about it.
Yeah.
Which actually reminded me of 𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀's potter analogy.
Oh, I love that one.
So it's not enough to just hear about pottery. To really get it, you have to get your hands in there, mold the clay, you know, mess up a couple of times.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think just like the potter, you develop discernment through that active application of what you learn from Buddhism into your own life.
Absolutely.
Seeing those teachings play out in your daily experiences.
Yeah.
That's where that true understanding, I think, comes in.
I completely agree with you on that one.
It's kind of like that quote from the Dhammapada about the fool who thinks he's wise.
Okay.
It says, a fool with a sense of his foolishness is at least to that extent wise. But a fool who thinks himself wise really deserves to be called a fool.
Right.
I think we've all met someone like that before, right?
Oh, absolutely. Someone who's totally blind to their own shortcomings.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it really emphasizes that idea of honesty, you know, with ourselves.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of 𝙀𝙀𝙀𝙀's teaching about recognizing our transgressions and forgiving others. He says, monks, these 2 are fools. Which is 2. The one who doesn't see his transgression as a transgression.
Right.
And the one who doesn't rightfully pardon another, who has confessed his transgression.
Right.
These 2 are fools.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful teaching because to me, it really speaks to the heart of what wisdom is.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging your own flaws. So you can approach things with humility.
Yeah.
but also extending forgiveness to other people so you can break free from resentment.
Yeah.
I think both of those are just real signs of wisdom.
Like choosing your battles wisely, right?
Exactly.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
But also, you know, don't shy away from the responsibility.
Right.
Which makes me think of Ajahn Lee's teaching about burdens.
Oh, yeah.
Monks, these two are fools. Which, two, the one who takes up a burden that hasn't fallen to him and the one who doesn't take up a burden that has, these two are fools.
That's a good one.
It really highlights that need for discernment in everyday life.
Yeah.
Figuring out where our energy is best spent.
Right.
Sometimes we take on burdens that aren't ours to carry.
Exactly.
And other times we're avoiding the responsibilities we should be embracing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah. And speaking of burdens, Ajahn Lee also talks about considering the long-term consequences of our actions.
Okay.
So he says, the course of action that is unpleasant to do, but that when done leads to what is profitable, is in light of this course of action that one may be known as a fool or a wise person.
That's interesting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it seems like he's reminding us that true discernment involves thinking beyond the immediate moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes doing the quote-unquote right thing can be uncomfortable in the short term, but it leads to positive outcomes down the road.
Yeah.
And conversely, what feels good now can actually create problems later.
Right. Yeah, like avoiding difficult conversations.
Well, for sure.
You know, it might feel easier in the moment
Totally.
to just let things slide.
Yeah.
But that could lead to much bigger issues down the line.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that and actually having the courage to act in a way that benefits everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you're connecting that back to discernment.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's not always about doing what's easy or comfortable.
Right.
It's about making choices that align with our values and ultimately lead to more positive consequences for ourselves
for everyone
and others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does all this connect to the idea of right view? Which we see mentioned in the pasted text.
Yeah, so right view is essentially about seeing the world clearly.
Okay.
Without the distortions of our own biases or our preconceived notions. You can kind of think of it as seeing things as they really are.
Okay.
And it involves understanding, you know, concepts like karma, rebirth,
Yeah.
and ultimately forms part of the Eightfold Path.
Okay.
Which is a set of guidelines for living a life that leads to liberation from suffering.
Gotcha. So there are different like levels to this.
Yes, definitely.
So it starts with, you know, understanding these basic Buddhist principles.
Right.
And then it goes deeper into this ability to see through the illusions and distortions that we create in our own mind.
It reminds me of Ajahn Lee's analogy.
Okay.
About the rusty watch.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where he talks about how we get caught up in trying to polish away every bit of rust.
Yeah.
But if we go too far and start taking it apart, the whole thing might stop working.
Right.
It's kind of this cautionary tale about clinging too tightly to our ideas and beliefs.
So even if we think we're doing good or have the right ideas, clinging too tightly can actually be harmful.
Exactly. It's the clinging. That's the problem. Attachment to anything, whether it's a material possession or an idea.
Right.
Even a certain view of ourselves can cause suffering.
So it's about that balance between understanding and letting go.
Exactly.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that story Ajahn Lee tells.
Okay.
About the old woman who burned her mouth on a cigar ember.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
And then pours water on all her matches.
What a great example of missing the cause and effect.
Yeah, yeah. Makes me wonder, how can we cultivate this deeper level of discernment in our everyday life?
Yeah.
How can we start to see those causes and effects more clearly?
Well, Ajahn Lee talked about how breath meditation can be a really powerful tool.
Okay, tell me more about that.
So he says, what does discernment come from? You might compare it with learning to become a potter. The same holds true in practicing meditation by paying close attention to our breath.
Right.
We're not just calming the mind.
Right.
We're actually training ourselves to be more aware and insightful.
Yeah.
It's about noticing those subtle nuances in our experience, making adjustments, and learning from those adjustments.
So we're kind of learning to observe ourselves in action.
That's a great way to put it.
Like the potter with the clay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we practice, we start to see more clearly those causes and effects in our own lives.
Yeah.
we begin to understand how our thoughts, our words, and our actions create these ripples that impact ourselves and those around us.
It reminds me of another one of Ajahn Lee's teachings.
Okay.
Where he describes 5 different kinds of knowledge.
Oh, wow.
That arise from observing causes and effects in meditation.
Yeah.
So we have the knowledge of arising and passing away, the knowledge of danger, the knowledge of dispassion, the knowledge of fading, and the knowledge of release.
Oh, wow. It's like he's laying out a roadmap for us.
Yeah.
Showing us how observing the breath can lead to such profound insights about the nature of reality.
Right. It's not just about an intellectual understanding. It's really a direct experience of how things are.
Yeah.
And I just love how Ajahn Lee really makes these profound teachings so down to earth.
Me too. I love how relatable he is.
Yeah, it's not some, lofty abstract concept of wisdom.
Right.
He's giving us practical tools that we can use in our everyday lives.
That's why I think his teachings resonate with so many people. He's connecting those ancient wisdom traditions to the reality of being human.
For sure. Wow, discernment is such a fascinating topic.
Right.
But I think we should move on to the second perfection we wanted to explore today, which is goodwill.
Wonderful.
Or metta in Pali.
Yes.
Which is just this boundless love and kindness that embraces all beings.
Yeah, and it really speaks to the heart of Buddhist teachings.
Yeah. There's a passage from the Satanapada that I just find so beautiful.
Oh, okay.
And inspiring.
Okay.
It says, think. Happy at rest, may all beings be happy at heart. May all beings be happy at heart. Let no one deceive another, or despise anyone anywhere, or through anger or resistance wish for another to suffer.
Oh, that is a beautiful passage.
Yeah. What strikes me is this idea of wishing happiness for all beings.
Yeah.
No exception.
Right.
It's not about picking and choosing who deserves our kindness. It's just recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every living being.
Yeah.
It sounds simple enough in theory.
Yeah, it does.
But I can imagine it's probably quite challenging.
Oh, it definitely can be.
To actually put that into practice.
Yeah.
Especially when we encounter those people that are difficult.
Right.
Or that have caused us harm.
Absolutely.
And cultivating goodwill is an active practice.
Yeah.
Not just
a passive feeling.
Absolutely.
And, like with discernment.
Yeah.
Ajahn Lee provides some practical guidance for how we can actually cultivate this quality.
I like that.
And he emphasizes the importance of starting with ourselves. He says, if you want to have a mind of goodwill, you have to start out by not harming yourself, either physically or mentally.
Right. That's a great starting point.
Yeah, that connection between harming ourselves and harming others really intrigues me.
Okay.
I've definitely noticed in my own life that when I'm feeling down on myself, I tend to be a lot more critical and impatient with others.
Right. It's like our inner state creates a ripple effect that impacts those around us. When we're harboring negative thoughts and emotions towards ourselves, it's just so much easier to project that outwards onto other people.
Yeah, and Ajahn Lee uses this great analogy about clearing space.
Oh, yeah. I like that one.
Within ourselves.
Can you remind me how he talks about it?
Yeah, so he says that we need to clear away the clutter of negative thoughts and emotions within ourselves to make room for goodwill to grow.
Right.
It's like if your closet is just jam-packed with stuff, you can't really fit anything new in there.
For sure.
But if you take the time to clear out some of that old clutter, then you have space for new, you know, beautiful things to come in.
Such a good visual.
Yeah. So it's about cultivating that inner peace and kindness towards ourselves.
Yes.
So that we can then extend it outwards to others.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's why Ajahn Lee goes as far to say,
okay,
the intention to do harm is a heavy form of self-harm.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it makes you think about the impact of our intentions, not just our actions.
Our thoughts.
Too.
Yeah. And it speaks to the importance of being mindful of the thoughts that we cultivate.
Yeah.
And Ajahn Lee actually recommends developing specific types of thoughts that are conducive to goodwill, like thoughts of renunciation, non-anger, and non-harming.
So it's like we're actively choosing to replace negativity with more positive intentions.
Exactly. It's an ongoing practice, this conscious effort to shift our mental state from one of negativity to one of kindness and compassion. Yeah, it reminds me of another one of Ajahn-Lee's teachings that I found a little puzzling. At first, he describes goodwill as a table with 3 legs that can spin in all directions.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
What do you think he means by that?
It's such an interesting metaphor.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, I see it as pointing to the expansive and transformative nature of goodwill.
Okay.
It's not just about wishing well for a few people we like or feel close to.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating this boundless heart that can embrace all beings.
It's like expanding our awareness beyond our usual, circle of care and concern.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating this panoramic view of the world. Where we can really see the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah.
And from that place of expanded awareness, we can respond to challenges with more wisdom and compassion.
It's like developing a more spacious heart.
Yes, exactly.
One that can hold both the joy and sorrow of the world.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it reminds me of Ajahn-Lee's analogy where he compares anger and fire.
Yeah, he says that anger is like having a fire burning down our house.
Right. And then he suggests that we need to get life insurance by cultivating goodwill.
It's a powerful image
to
kind of illustrate the destructive nature of anger and ill will.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing that.
Yeah.
Even when we encounter people that seem, difficult or challenging, that there's still that inherent potential for goodness within them.
So it's about choosing to see the best in others.
Exactly.
Even when it's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm starting to get this, but I'm still wrestling with how to reconcile this idea of goodwill with the fact that some people just seem genuinely bad or evil.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Right.
And Ajahn Lee actually acknowledges that complexity when he says, we human beings aren't equal or identical in our goodness and evil. And then he uses this really interesting analogy of a farmer, a merchant, and a government official.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
He explains how diversity is actually essential for the world to function. We need farmers to grow our food.
Right.
Merchants to facilitate trade. And government officials to maintain order. And if everybody were the same, society would just fall apart.
Right. So it's like appreciating the interconnectedness and interdependence of all those roles.
Exactly.
And perspectives.
Right. And true goodwill involves recognizing and accepting those differences.
Okay.
It's about understanding that each person has, their own unique set of strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that we all have something to offer the world.
Right. It's not about condoning harmful actions.
Oh, not at all.
But about understanding that everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah.
And we all have that potential for both goodness and badness within us.
Exactly.
And I just love how this all ties back to discernment.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the complexity of human nature, recognizing that inherent worth of each individual. Yeah.
And then choosing to respond with kindness.
Yeah.
And compassion.
That's what it all comes down to.
And this really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in our judgments and our reactions.
Right.
But Ajahn Lee's teachings offer such a powerful framework.
Yes, they do.
For cultivating a more mindful and compassionate way of being
absolutely.
In the world.
He truly does.
Yeah.
I find it so inspiring how he blends that ancient wisdom with such practical, down-to-earth guidance.
For sure. It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit for navigating life's challenges with more wisdom and compassion.
I love that.
I mean, we've covered so much.
I know, right?
And I feel like we're just scratching the surface here of what Ajahn Lee has to offer.
Absolutely. It's incredible how these teachings apply to so many different aspects of our lives.
From relationships to work to our inner world.
Yeah.
It all comes back to that. Cultivating a more mindful and compassionate way of being.
It makes me think of that saying.
Okay.
Not all storms come to disrupt your life. Some come to clear your path.
Oh, I like that.
And discernment.
Yeah.
Coupled with goodwill really helps us weather those storms with grace and understanding.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. It's not about becoming emotionless or detached. True goodwill doesn't deny the reality of suffering or injustice. It acknowledges it and chooses to respond with kindness and compassion.
Even when things are difficult.
Exactly.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions or pretending everything's okay.
It's about making a choice.
It's
choosing our response. Rather than reacting impulsively.
Exactly. Okay, so why don't we take a moment to recap what we've learned in this deep dive into discernment and goodwill.
Okay.
So we started by exploring discernment.
Yes.
And I was really struck by the emphasis on active engagement with knowledge.
Yeah, you can't just hear about the teachings.
It's not enough.
You have to apply them.
You have to put them into practice. See how they play out in your own experiences.
And I think that active engagement then leads to a deeper understanding of cause and effect.
Which 𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙞𝙡 points to as a key element of discernment.
And he even talks about using breath meditation.
As
a way to develop that heightened awareness of causes and effects.
It's like training our minds.
Exactly.
To become more attuned to the subtle nuances of our experiences. And as we practice, we start to see those connections more clearly.
Absolutely.
And from that place of clearer seeing, we can make those wiser choices.
Exactly.
Knowing that our actions have consequences that ripple outwards, impacting ourselves and those around us.
We also explored the idea of right view.
Which is about seeing the world clearly. Without those distortions.
The distortions of our own biases.
Our preconceived notions.
And our limiting beliefs.
And through that practice of discernment, we can start to see through those illusions. And gain a more accurate understanding of reality.
And I think that shift in perception really opens up the space for goodwill to flourish.
For sure. And we talk about how goodwill really starts with being kind to ourselves. Recognizing that the way we treat ourselves really sets the tone for how we interact with the world around us.
Exactly. And 𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙞𝙀 makes that powerful statement that the intention to do harm is a heavy form of self-harm.
A stark reminder that harboring negativity towards others ultimately harms us as well.
Yes, and cultivating goodwill isn't just about warm, fuzzy feelings. It's about that active choice to respond with kindness and compassion.
Even when it's difficult.
Exactly.
And it's about actively choosing to replace those negative thoughts with more positive intentions. Cultivating loving kindness towards ourselves and extending that same kindness outwards to all beings. And remember that powerful metaphor. Goodwill as a table with 3 legs that can spin in all directions.
I love that one.
It speaks to the boundless nature of this quality.
Absolutely. It can encompass all beings. Without exception.
It's about expanding that circle of care and concern beyond our usual limits, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things. And we also talked about how discernment and goodwill really work together.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Helping us to navigate the complexities of life with more wisdom and compassion.
It's about understanding that everyone is on their own journey.
We all have the capacity for both goodness and badness within us.
And 𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙞𝙀 reminds us that we human beings aren't equal or identical in our goodness and evil.
It's not about condoning harmful actions, but about recognizing that inherent worth and dignity of individual individual, even those that might seem difficult or challenging.
And I think as we cultivate both discernment and goodwill, we start to see the world through a different lens.
Absolutely. One that is more compassionate.
More understanding. And more forgiving.
More forgiving, for sure.
It makes me think of 𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙞𝙀's teaching. That the heart at normalcy is the substance of virtue.
Ooh, that's a good one.
What does it mean to live from a place of natural goodness? How can we cultivate that heart at normalcy in our own lives?
That is such a powerful question to leave our listeners with.
I hope it inspires them.
I hope so, too.
To explore these teachings further and see how they can transform their lives.
From the inside out.
Exactly.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Into discernment and goodwill.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, may we all cultivate that heart at normalcy.
Yes.
And bring more kindness and wisdom into the world.
Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. This time we're going deep on generosity and renunciation in Buddhism.
Two big ideas.
Yeah, they really are. But, we'll find a way to make them relatable.
Of course. Always.
So we'll be looking at a bunch of Buddhist texts.
Classic ones, some more obscure ones.
Exactly. And hopefully finding some down-to-earth wisdom.
And hopefully some stuff that'll make you think differently about how you're living your life.
Totally. And one of the first things that really got me thinking was this idea of the 4 foundations of fellowship.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
Yeah. Giving kind words, beneficial help, and consistency.
They're like the bedrock of any healthy relationship.
And they're so easy to forget about.
It's true. We take them for granted sometimes.
Like, how often do we actually think about being consistent in our relationships?
Not as often as we should.
Right. But if you think about it, those foundations are like the glue that holds society together.
Without them, everything falls apart. Even families. I mean, think about it.
I've actually been trying to be more conscious of these lately, especially with my family.
How's that going?
It's amazing how much of a difference just small acts of kindness can make. Or offering a helping hand when someone's struggling.
Absolutely. And it's not always about those grand gestures either.
Right. Sometimes it's just about showing up consistently for someone.
Being a good listener, offering a word of encouragement, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's about those little things that build trust and connection over time.
I think that's what the Buddha was getting at when he talked about those 4 foundations.
Totally. And speaking of giving, there's this really interesting conversation in one of the texts where a king asks the Buddha, where should a gift be given?
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, me too. And you know what the Buddha says?
Let me guess. Wherever the mind feels confidence.
Yep.
It's such a simple answer, but it's so profound. It's not about where you give. It's about why you give.
It's about giving from a place of genuine care and trust, not just out of obligation or to make yourself look good.
Exact.
And then the king asks another question. He says, okay, but where does a gift bear the most fruit?
Another good one, and I bet I know this one too. To a virtuous person.
Bingo. It's like he's saying it matters who we give to.
Makes sense, right? If you want to make a real difference, you want to support people who are already doing good in the world.
It's like planting a seed in fertile soil.
Exactly. It has a much better chance of flourishing.
That makes me think about my charitable donations,
Yeah.
Maybe I should be thinking more about where my money's going.
Yeah, not just giving blindly, but making sure it aligns with my values.
And making sure it's going to people who are really using it to make a positive impact.
Exactly. It's about giving with both wisdom and compassion.
And speaking of making an impact, there's this other text that talks about a donation being endowed with 6 factors.
6 factors.
Yeah, 6 factors to maximize its impact.
That's interesting. I don't think I'm familiar with that one. Tell me more.
Okay, so 3 relate to the donor's state of mind.
Oh, that makes sense.
Being glad before giving, clear during giving, and feeling gratified afterward. And then 3 relate to the recipient.
So it's not just about how much you give. It's about the entire mental and emotional landscape surrounding the act of giving.
Exactly. Like for the recipient, the text talks about them being free from greed, aversion, and delusion. Or at least working to overcome those things.
That's powerful. It suggests that giving can actually help people on their spiritual path.
Right. It's not just about giving material things. It's about contributing to someone's well-being on a deeper level. And, when all 6 of those factors align,
I bet something really cool happens.
The text says it creates an abundance of merit, like the vastness of the ocean. It's like that feeling you get when you give a gift that's just perfect.
Something the other person is going to love.
Exactly. It's not just about the gift itself. It's about the joy it brings to both the giver and the receiver.
That's beautiful, and it's something we can cultivate within ourselves, regardless of our external circumstances. Which actually brings us to another interesting idea, the distinction between inner wealth and outer wealth.
I was just getting to that. Aisha Lee talks about this a lot, right?
He does. It's one of his central themes. Material possessions are impermanent, but the qualities we cultivate within ourselves, that's what creates lasting wealth.
The generosity and wisdom.
Exactly. Those are the real treasures.
He even compares it to planting crops on land to secure ownership.
Oh, I like that.
Like by using our material wealth for generous acts, we're planting seeds for inner wealth.
It's such a powerful metaphor. Generosity as an investment, not just in others, but in our own spiritual growth. Makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, am I chasing after the wrong kind of wealth? Am I too focused on material things when I should be cultivating inner peace and wisdom?
Those are good questions to ask ourselves. And it leads us to another really profound concept, kaga.
Gaga.
Yeah, it's like a higher form of giving where we relinquish all sense of ownership.
So it's not even about giving things away. It's about letting go of the idea that anything belongs to us in the first place.
That's the idea. It's about recognizing that everything is interconnected and impermanent.
Wow, that's a pretty radical concept, especially in our culture where we're so focused on acquiring more and more stuff.
It is radical, but it's also incredibly liberating.
I can imagine. But it's got to be hard, right? Like to truly let go of that clinging to mind.
It definitely takes practice, but the texts say the rewards are immeasurable.
Makes me think about the Buddha. Didn't he struggle with this at first?
He did. One text mentions how he initially found renunciation difficult. He understood it intellectually, but his heart wasn't fully in it.
So what changed for him?
He had to really contemplate the drawbacks of sensual pleasures and the rewards of letting go.
He had to experience it for himself.
Exactly. It wasn't enough to just think about it. He had to feel it in his own heart. And then everything shifted for him.
So we've been talking a lot about like cultivating a generous heart, but there's this one text that lays out 5 specific qualities for giving with integrity.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's not really about like how much you give, more about the intention behind it.
The thought behind the action, yeah.
It mentions giving with conviction, giving attentively, in season, with empathy.
And without causing harm to yourself or others.
Yeah. That one's huge. Like they're all interconnected, you know?
They definitely build on each other.
Like if you're giving with empathy, you're not going to want to cause harm.
Right. It's about being mindful of the impact of our actions.
And the text goes on to say that like each quality kind of leads to different fruits.
Oh, that's right.
Like giving with conviction leads to abundance. Giving attentively fosters harmony within the family.
It's like a ripple effect.
Totally. And it's not just about external stuff either.
Right.
Like these qualities, they kind of nourish our inner world too.
Exactly. They cultivate peace and contentment.
But then there's this other text that kind of challenges our motivations for giving.
Uh-oh.
Like it lists out all these reasons for giving that don't actually lead to the highest spiritual fruit.
Like what?
Like seeking personal gain, trying to store up merit for the afterlife.
Oh, interesting.
Or even just upholding family traditions.
Like we've always done it this way, kind of thing.
Exactly. So it's like a reminder to really check in with ourselves.
See what's driving our actions, yeah.
Yeah. So what does the text say is the key difference?
Giving with the thought, this is an ornament for the mind, a support for the mind.
Oh, I like that. So it's more about cultivating inner qualities.
Not chasing external rewards.
And that inner transformation, that's what really leads to liberation.
That's the ultimate goal.
But it seems like generosity is not just beneficial, it's kind of crucial.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because there's this other text that explicitly links stinginess with hindering spiritual progress.
It's a big deal.
It's like without generosity, we're putting up these barriers.
Blocking ourselves from growing.
And it's not just about material possessions either.
Right.
The text mentions being stingy with lodgings, family, gain, status.
Even the teachings themselves.
Yeah. So it's like a call to open ourselves up on every level.
Let go of that tight grip.
But generosity has benefits too, right? It's not all about self-sacrifice.
Definitely.
There's this text that talks about how a generous person becomes dear and charming to others.
People are drawn to them.
They earn the admiration of good people. And they get this widespread reputation for kindness.
It's like generosity creates this positive feedback loop.
The more we give, the more we receive.
And it's not just about material things either.
Right. It's about those feelings of connection and appreciation.
It ripples outwards, impacting everyone around us.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep on generosity, but what about its counterpart?
Renunciation.
Exactly. And there's this one text that puts it so simply. It says, if by forsaking a limited ease he would see an abundance of ease, the enlightened man would forsake the limited ease for the sake of the abundant.
Powerful, right? It gets right to the heart of it.
Yeah. It's about making that conscious choice to let go of temporary pleasures. And another text talks about trading aging for the ageless, burning for the unbound.
Ooh, I like that one. It's so evocative.
Yeah. And then there's this one where a monk talks about the 4 requisites: robes, food, lodging, and medicine.
He's saying that's all you really need.
Just the essentials, yeah. It's about simplifying.
Letting go of unnecessary attachments.
But another text reminds us that, like, this path, it's not always easy peasy.
It takes work, yeah.
This monk, he's saying you got to put in effort.
Overcome unskillful qualities, cultivate skillful ones.
It's not just about giving up possessions. It's about that inner work, too.
It's about purifying the mind and heart.
And that's where those qualities of generosity come in.
They lay the foundation for transformation.
Totally. And then there's this story about 𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙖𝙞.
𝙀𝙢𝙖𝙖, who's that?
He was this guy who had experienced, like, the bliss of kingship.
Wow, the top of the world.
But he found even greater joy in the simple life of a monk.
They gave it all up.
And the way he describes his newfound happiness, it's just so beautiful.
What does he say?
He says, I dwell without fear, unagitated, confident, and unafraid, unconcerned, unrustled, my want satisfied, with my mind like a wild deer.
Wow. That's powerful. It's like he's found true freedom.
Yeah, a mind that's free from all those anxieties and worries.
Like a wild deer just roaming free in the forest.
It makes me wonder, though, why do we cling so tightly to things that cause us suffering?
It's the big question, isn't it?
Maybe we're just conditioned to believe that happiness comes from acquiring more stuff.
Or seeking pleasure, avoiding pain.
But all these teachings we've been talking about, they point to a different path.
A path to true and lasting happiness.
Through generosity, renunciation, and realizing our true nature.
It's a path worth exploring.
Absolutely. So we've talked about generosity, we've talked about renunciation, but I feel like we need to explore this idea of letting go a little bit more.
It's at the heart of it all, isn't it?
Yeah. And one of the texts talks about how an untrained mind reacts to pain.
Oh.
And how it clings to sensual pleasures as the only way to escape.
It's like our default mode, isn't it?
Like we're wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
It's instinctual.
It's like that feeling of wanting to distract ourselves when something difficult comes up.
We reach for our phones, we turn on the TV.
Anything to avoid facing that discomfort.
But those things only provide temporary relief, right?
Exactly. They don't actually address the root of the problem.
And in fact, they often make things worse.
Yeah, because we become dependent on those external things to regulate our emotion.
It's a vicious cycle.
And this text uses this really powerful analogy of being shot with two arrows.
Oh, I've heard that one.
The first arrow is the initial pain, and the second arrow is our reaction to it.
Our mental and emotional reaction.
And it's often that second arrow, the one we inflict on ourselves, that causes the most suffering.
Because we're adding to the pain.
Yeah, we're piling on the suffering.
So the question is, how do we stop shooting ourselves with that second arrow?
Right, how do we break free from that cycle?
The text says that a well-instructed disciple, when touched by pain, doesn't get swept away by sorrow, grief, lamentation. They experience the pain, but they don't add that extra layer of mental anguish.
So it's not about pretending that pain doesn't exist.
No, not at all.
It's about relating to it differently.
It's about observing it with mindfulness and compassion.
Allowing it to arise and pass away.
Without getting completely overwhelmed.
And that reminds me of the Buddha.
Of course, he's our ultimate role model.
This other text says that even he had to work at this, like before his enlightenment, he understood the value of renunciation intellectually.
He got it on a theoretical level.
But it wasn't until he deeply contemplated the drawbacks of sensual pleasures
and the rewards of letting go
that his heart fully embraced the path.
It had to go from his head to his heart.
It's like we can read all the books and listen to all the podcasts in the world, but until we feel it in our own hearts, it's just information.
It's not transformative until it becomes embodied.
Exactly. And for the Buddha, it sounds like that shift happened through direct experience.
He had to see for himself the illusory nature of sensual pleasures.
And the lasting peace that comes from letting go.
That's powerful.
So how can we start to cultivate this kind of freedom in our own lives?
Well, it doesn't have to be a huge, overwhelming thing. We can start small.
Like how?
Simple practices like mindfulness and meditation can make a big difference.
Just paying attention to our thoughts and feelings.
Without judgment.
And from there, we can start to experiment with gently letting go.
It might be something small.
Like resisting the urge to buy something we don't need.
Or noticing when we're getting caught up in a story about something that's causing us pain.
And every time we let go, even in a small way,
we're strengthening our capacity for freedom and peace.
It's like a muscle we can train.
Exactly. And generosity can play a big role in this too.
Because it shifts our focus from me to we.
Exactly.
It helps us loosen our grip on that idea of a separate self.
Every act of kindness, every moment of genuine connection, it chips away at those barriers we create between ourselves and others.
And it brings us back to that interconnectedness we talked about earlier.
It's all coming full circle.
It really is. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into generosity and enunciation.
It's been a good one.
Yeah, I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
We did, and I hope our listeners got something out of it.
I know I did. And I hope they'll keep exploring these ideas on their own.
Keep diving deep.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive. Welcome to our deep dive. And today we'll be exploring...
that kind that helps you stay grounded no matter what life throws at you.
Exactly, like a superpower.
Right. And more specifically, we'll be talking about how to cultivate endurance and equanimity. And I know that's something you're keen on.
Mm-hmm.
So you can better manage stress, right? And maybe even, find a little more peace in your everyday life.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating because what we're going to be looking at today is actually, it goes way back, like way, way back.
I was going to say, to find this calm, we're going way back to the wisdom of the Buddha himself.
Mm-hmm.
And a respected Thai teacher named Ajahn Lee.
And what's amazing is how these ancient Buddhist teachings are still so relevant today, even though they are thousands of years old.
Right. You'd think, well, what could they possibly have to say to us now?
Yeah.
But they offer these really practical insights into, cultivating that inner strength that I think we all crave.
Definitely.
Okay, so before we really get into the heart of it, can you give us a working definition of endurance and equanimity?
Sure.
I mean, I think most people kind of have a general idea.
Yeah.
But it helps to really break it down.
Absolutely. So endurance in this context is, it's more than just gritting your teeth and pushing through.
Right.
It's about recognizing that change is constant.
Yeah.
And learning to stay grounded and present even when things are tough. So think of it like a mental muscle you're developing.
I like that.
The ability to bend without breaking.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not about ignoring difficult feelings, right?
No.
But it's about learning to kind of ride the waves.
Exactly. Yeah. Ride those waves. And then there's equanimity.
Okay.
Which the Buddha describes as a state of inner peace. That comes from letting go of clinging and craving. It's not about becoming emotionless, but rather about developing a deep inner stability that's not dependent on external conditions.
So it's like finding that calm center within yourself.
Yes.
No matter what's going on around you.
Precisely. Yeah. And it makes me think of that story about the Buddha enduring a stone sliver in his foot.
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring that up.
Wow.
That's one of my favorites.
While being taunted by Mara.
Oh, Mara.
Yeah.
That embodiment of temptation and doubt, always trying to throw a wrench in the works.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine calmly meditating with a stone stuck in my foot.
Right.
Let alone with someone like Mara whispering in my ear.
Right.
What was that exchange like?
So in the Samyutta Nikaya, it says that Mara basically accused the Buddha of being lazy and lacking direction.
Really?
Yeah. But the Buddha was unfazed.
Wow.
He said, "I have found true peace," and compared himself to someone who can sleep soundly even with an arrow piercing their body because the arrow of suffering had been removed.
Because the pain doesn't have power over him anymore.
It doesn't define his experience.
He's not resisting it. He's not, letting it define him.
Yeah, and that's a crucial insight into developing real endurance. It's not about becoming immune to pain or difficulty, but about finding that place of inner peace, even in the midst of it.
Yeah.
He was using his pain as an opportunity to cultivate deeper understanding and compassion.
That's so powerful. And it seems like this idea of endurance as an active practice rather than just passive suffering pops up a lot in the source material.
It does.
Like those monks, enduring the harsh conditions in the forest, right?
Yeah, in the Therigatha that compares them to warriors and elephants.
Right.
Highlighting their unwavering focus and commitment. They willingly embraced discomfort.
Yeah, it was
as part of their training.
Part of the path, yeah.
Yeah.
And then, there's also that story of the lady Vidahika and her slave colleague.
Right.
Which felt kind of like a cautionary tale.
It is.
About true versus fake calmness.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Majjhima Nikaya describes Vidahika as someone who had a reputation for being even-tempered.
Yeah, right.
But when her slave colleague intentionally provoked her, she lost control and became really angry and violent.
So it wasn't genuine equanimity.
Right.
It was just this surface level composure that crumbled under pressure.
Exactly. Yeah, it shows that true resilience isn't dependent on circumstances being just right.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating with inner stability that can weather any storm.
Right. Yeah, it has to come from within.
Yeah, and both the Buddha and Ajahn Lee offer some really compelling metaphors for how we can actually train our minds to become more resilient. Like warriors going into battle.
Yeah, I love that analogy of the 5 types of warriors.
Yeah.
The ones who freak out at the first sign of a dust cloud versus those who can handle hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
It's such a vivid image.
Yeah. The Anguttara Nikaya uses this metaphor to illustrate different levels of mental fortitude.
Okay.
So some people crumble at the first sign of difficulty, while others can handle, progressively greater challenges.
And the takeaway being that, we can train ourselves to become the warriors who charge ahead, unfazed by the dust cloud and the enemy banners.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about recognizing those early warning signs in ourselves, those metaphorical dust clouds.
Okay.
And choosing to respond with courage and clarity, rather than reacting with fear or anger.
Okay.
And this is where Ajahn Lee's teachings become really relevant.
Yeah.
Especially his emphasis on persistence and mental toughness.
Yeah.
He was all about cultivating that diamond-like strength of mind.
Like, don't be a marshmallow.
Right.
Cultivate some grit.
Well, he was a little more eloquent than that.
Okay.
But his point was that even the Buddha faced immense obstacles.
Right.
Mara was constantly trying to distract and discourage him.
Yeah.
But he never wavered in his commitment.
Yeah.
So Ajahn Lee wanted us to approach our own practice with that same level of dedication and determination.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That reminds me of another comparison that Ajahn Lee made.
Yeah.
The one about the king's elephant?
Right. The Anguttara Nikaya describes how a well-trained elephant can remain calm and focused even amidst distractions.
Okay.
Like, loud noises, strong smells, or physical discomfort.
Interesting.
So Ajahn Lee was saying we should train our minds in the same way.
Wow.
And he even says that being able to stay grounded in the face of sensory distractions makes us deserving of gifts, just like a well-trained elephant.
Oh, okay.
Is a valuable asset to a king.
So it's not about like trying to block out all sensory input.
No.
Right?
No.
But it's about learning to observe it without getting swept away by it.
Exactly. Yeah. Develop that inner elephantine calm.
Inner elephantine calm. I like that. That's great. And, and that ability to remain grounded amidst distractions is a key component of equanimity, right?
It is.
But it's important to understand that equanimity isn't just like one thing.
Right.
Yeah. There are different levels, different nuances to this quality of inner peace.
Absolutely.
So tell us more about that, the different types of equanimity.
Okay, well, so the Buddha himself distinguished between what he called worldly and unworldly equanimity in the Samyutta Nikaya.
Okay.
So worldly equanimity is a kind of calmness that comes from having things go your way.
Right.
When you're enjoying a delicious meal or the weather is perfect.
Right, when everything's going your way.
It feels good, but it's fleeting because it depends on those external factors.
It's superficial.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm calm because everything is going according to my plan.
Exactly.
But what happens when things inevitably, go off the rails?
Then what? Yeah, that's where the unworldly equanimity comes in.
Okay.
And this is a much deeper, more stable form of peace that comes from within, regardless of what's happening externally.
So it's like accessing that deep well of inner peace that isn't reliant on external validation or circumstances going a certain way.
Yeah.
It's there regardless.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And isn't this deeper equanimity connected to what the Buddha called jhanas?
Yes, exactly. So in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha described 4 jhanas, which are increasingly deeper states of meditative absorption.
Okay.
They're not easy to attain, but they point to the fact that there are these progressively deeper levels of calm and clarity available to us through practice.
So it's like equanimity is a skill we can build.
It is.
It's a muscle we can strengthen.
Exactly.
Through meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah, it's not about suddenly becoming a Zen master overnight.
Right.
But about consistently practicing and refining our mind.
Hey.
The Buddha used the analogy of a goldsmith refining gold.
Oh, yeah. I love the goldsmith analogy from the Anguttara Nikaya.
It's a great one.
Yeah.
It illustrates the process of refining our minds.
Right.
So just as a goldsmith carefully uses heat, water, and observation to purify and refine gold, we can use mindfulness and meditation to gradually refine our minds and cultivate greater equanimity.
And Ajahn Lee
had
some fascinating thoughts about how we could approach this refining process.
He did.
Especially, his advice on making the mind zero.
Right.
I remember reading that and thinking, make the mind zero. How do you even do that?
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
But it's such a powerful image.
It is. Yeah, he was all about simplifying.
Right.
About letting go of the mental clutter and attachments that weigh us down. He actually talks about making the mind one first through focused concentration. And then once that's established, making the mind zero by releasing even that focus.
So you transcend the duality.
Arriving at a state of pure awareness.
Of one and zero alternative.
Exactly. It's about letting go of clinging even to the idea of focus itself.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And this idea of making the mind zero ties into a really provocative concept that Ajahn Lee emphasized, the idea of putting the zeros first. He uses this simple mathematical image to highlight a profound truth about how we can approach life and cultivate lasting peace. But I think that's a conversation.
Yeah, let's say
that's the next part of our deep dive.
That's a great cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We'll put a pin in that.
All right.
Come back to it next time.
Sounds good.
Okay, so this whole putting the zeros first idea. Yeah.
It's super intriguing, but I got to admit, it's a little bit mind-bending.
It is.
How does Ajahn Lee actually use this math concept to illustrate like a spiritual truth?
So think about what happens when you add a 0 to the end of a number in math.
Okay.
It multiplies the value tenfold. 10 becomes 100, 100 becomes 1,000, right?
Yeah.
But if you put the 0 before a number,
yeah,
it doesn't change the value at all.
Right.
1,000 is still 0.
Right. It's like those zeros in front are meaningless.
Exactly. And that's precisely Ajahn Lee's point.
Okay.
He's suggesting that when we prioritize that inner emptiness, that 0 state of pure awareness, all the things that usually have such a big impact on us, praise, criticism, success, failure, they lose their power to define us.
It's like they become those meaningless zeros.
Exactly. Yeah. In front of the essential 0 of our true nature.
So we're like creating this kind of buffer, this protective shield.
Yeah.
By putting that 0 of emptiness first,
yes,
we're not letting those external events or opinions dictate our sense of self-worth.
Exactly. And that's incredibly freeing.
I can see that, yeah.
Think about how much energy we waste.
Yeah.
Worrying about what other people think or striving for external validation.
Oh, so much.
When we put the zeros first, we're essentially saying none of that really matters.
Right.
What matters is cultivating that inner peace and letting that be my foundation.
That's powerful, but it also sounds pretty challenging.
It is, yeah.
I mean, we're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be achieving.
Right.
How we should be living our lives.
Right, exactly.
It takes like real effort to step back from that.
Yeah.
And say, nope, my inner peace comes first.
You're absolutely right. It's not an easy path.
Right.
But it's a worthwhile one. Okay. And remember, it's a practice. It's not about achieving some perfect state of detachment overnight.
Right.
It's about making a conscious choice moment by moment to prioritize our inner well-being.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a practice, not a destination. I think that makes it feel more accessible, less daunting.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering, like, how can we practically apply these teachings in our daily lives?
Yeah.
It's one thing to understand the concepts,
right, but
it's another to actually put them into action.
That's a great question. And I think the key lies in cultivating mindfulness.
Okay.
It's about learning to become aware of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the present moment without judgment.
Okay.
So when we develop that mindful awareness, we start to create space between our reactions and our true selves.
So instead of immediately like reacting with anger when someone cuts us off in traffic.
Exactly.
We can,
pause, take a breath, observe that feeling of anger without getting swept away by it.
Like it's just a feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can remind ourselves that the traffic jam is temporary. Our anger won't make it go away any faster.
Right.
And in that space of mindful awareness, we can choose a more skillful response.
So we're training ourselves to become that king's elephant.
Yes.
Steady, calm, unfazed by the distractions and annoyances of daily life.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to remember that, the benefits of cultivating endurance and equanimity, they extend far beyond just dealing with difficult situations.
They do, yeah.
They also offer this path to a deeper, more fulfilling way of life.
Absolutely.
How so? Like, what does that look like?
Well, when we train our minds to be less reactive, to be less attached to outcomes, we start to experience this sense of freedom and contentment that's independent of external circumstances.
So it's not about becoming passive or like realigning ourselves to whatever life throws at us.
No, not at all.
It's about finding that inner peace that allows us to, navigate the ups and downs with more grace and ease.
Exactly. And it's about learning to appreciate the simple things. To find joy in the present moment, regardless of whether things are going our way or not.
Right. It reminds me of that quote from the Dhamma Nikaya.
Yeah.
Their total stilling is bliss.
Beautiful.
It's not about eliminating all experience.
Right.
But it's about finding that stillness within ourselves that allows us to experience bliss even amidst the chaos.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that bliss isn't some far-off, unattainable state.
Right.
It's available to us right here, right now, as we cultivate these qualities of endurance and equanimity in our hearts and minds.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to this idea of worldly versus unworldly equanimity.
Okay, yeah.
Can you elaborate on the difference between those two?
Of course. So as we mentioned before, worldly equanimity is that kind of surface level calm we experience when things are going well.
Right.
It's like a fragile piece that can easily be shattered when circumstances change.
Okay.
Unworldly equanimity, on the other hand, is a much deeper, more stable form of inner peace that doesn't depend on external conditions.
So it's like the difference between a calm pond and the depths of the ocean.
Yes.
The pond might look peaceful on the surface.
Right.
But it can easily be disturbed,
Right.
by a gust of wind or a thrown stone.
Exactly.
The ocean, however, remains vast and deep,
Yes.
largely unfazed by surface-level disturbances.
That's a brilliant analogy.
And the key to cultivating that oceanic depth of equanimity lies in understanding that our true nature isn't defined by like our thoughts and feelings and our experiences.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that we are something more than just our constantly changing mental states.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the idea of making the mind zero. Right. It's about letting go of all the stories we tell ourselves, all the labels we attach to ourselves, and simply resting in that state of pure awareness.
So like we're peeling back the layers of conditioning and identification to reveal that essential emptiness.
Exactly.
That zero state.
That's always been there.
That's always been there. And in that emptiness, in that zero state, we find true freedom and liberation.
Yes.
We're no longer bound by our fears, our desires, our limiting beliefs.
Exactly.
There's that theme again, this whole idea of zero. Like, it's really central to cultivating lasting peace and resilience.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Okay.
And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some practical ways to incorporate this understanding of zero into our daily lives.
Okay, so we've talked about this making the mind zero and putting the zeros first.
Yeah.
And it's such a fascinating concept, but it's a little mind-bending, to be honest.
It is.
So what does it actually look like to put those zeros first in our everyday life?
Well, it starts with understanding what those zeros represent.
Okay.
Remember Ajahn Lee used that math metaphor to illustrate the idea of prioritizing inner emptiness.
Okay.
That state of pure awareness where we're not clinging to thoughts or emotions or external conditions.
So it's like recognizing that all those things,
Yeah.
Our thoughts, emotions, ups, downs, it's all temporary.
Fleeting. Yeah.
They're like those zeros that don't actually change the core values of who we are.
Right. And when we put that zero of emptiness first, all those other things lose their power to define us. We're no longer constantly reacting to every little thing that happens. We're able to observe our experiences with more detachment and clarity.
It's like we're creating that space between ourselves and our reactions. And that's where wisdom and compassion can emerge.
That's a great way to put it. And that space is where real freedom lies.
Oh, okay.
When we're not so caught up in the drama of our thoughts and emotions, we're able to respond to life's challenges with more grace and equanimity.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this ties back into the concepts of endurance and equanimity we've been talking about.
Exactly.
It's about cultivating that inner strength.
Yes.
That stability that allows us to weather any storm.
Exactly. And it's not about becoming emotionless or suppressing our feelings, but about learning to observe them with mindfulness and compassion without letting them dictate our actions.
So how do we practically do this?
Yeah.
It's one thing to understand it.
Right.
But it's another to embody it.
Absolutely. So Ajahn Lee emphasized the importance of making a conscious effort to shift our perspective. He said, instead of let things drag us along, we should drag them along.
Okay, I like that.
What he meant was that we need to take charge of our minds.
Right. Train them like those warrior monks we were talking about. So instead of being at the mercy of our thoughts and emotions, we're choosing to lead them.
Yes.
Direct them.
In a skillful way.
Okay.
And it starts with simple things like becoming aware of our breath, paying attention to our body sensations, noticing the thoughts and emotions that come up throughout the day.
That sounds like mindfulness.
It is. Mindfulness is a powerful tool for cultivating that zero state of awareness.
Yeah.
When we practice mindfulness, we're training ourselves to be more present, more aware of what's happening within us and around us.
Right. And in that awareness, we start to see things more clearly.
Yeah. We see that our thoughts and emotions are not permanent. They come and go like waves in the ocean.
And we become more skilled at riding those waves.
Yes.
So we don't get swept away.
Exactly. And we start to experience that sense of inner peace that's not dependent on conditions.
Like building that unshakable foundation.
Yes.
Zero stake that's always there.
That's always present. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And as we cultivate that inner stillness, we find that we can navigate the ups and downs of life with more ease and grace.
Okay.
We're less reactive, less judgmental,
right.
more compassionate towards ourselves and others.
I think what really struck me about Ajahn Lee's teachings is that he doesn't present it as some lofty, unattainable ideal.
Right.
He makes it feel very accessible.
Yes.
Like something we can actually, strive for.
Yeah, and that's what's so inspiring about his message.
Right.
He reminds us that this is a journey we can all embark on, regardless of background or experience.
Right.
It's about making that conscious choice to prioritize our inner peace, to cultivate those qualities of endurance and equanimity that allow us to live more fully and freely.
So if you had to distill all this into like one key takeaway for our listeners, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
What would you want them to remember?
I think Ajahn Lee said it best. This is something that can't be written, can't be read, that we understand only for ourselves.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The real understanding comes from direct experience.
Right.
From putting these teachings into practice.
So it's not enough to just listen to us talk about it.
No.
We have to actually go out and experiment.
Yeah. Try it out. Yeah.
See how it plays out in our own lives.
Exactly. Make it personal. Find what works for you.
Right.
And commit to that practice.
Yeah.
I have a feeling our wonders are going to walk away from us with a lot to ponder.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Especially that question Ajahn Lee posed.
Oh, yeah.
What would it mean to put the zeros first in our own lives?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope this has given everyone some valuable insights and inspiration to begin that exploration.
Me too.
I know he has for me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this incredible deep dive.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Into the heart of calmness.
Absolutely.
It's been truly enlightening.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. And to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
keep practicing, keep exploring.
Yeah.
And may you find that deep well of peace within yourselves.
Absolutely. 23 hours.